Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by and welcome to the Heartbleed Bug, What Is It, and How to Protect Your Site webinar. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If you'd like to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left corner of your screen. If you need to reach an operator at any time, please press *0. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded Wednesday, April 16, 2014. I would now like to turn the webinar over to Ellie Stajkova. Please go ahead.
Good morning or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. Welcome to the webinar brought to you by CloudFlare. The topic of the webinar is the Heartbleed bug, what is it, and how to protect your site. I am Maninthemiddle, marketing at CloudFlare, and I will be your host today. We have just a few housekeeping items to go over before we begin. In terms of agenda, we have about 20 minutes of total material. I am joined by Nick Sullivan, systems engineer at CloudFlare, and Ben Murphy, software developer at Phonics. He's based in London. All attendees are placed in listen-only mode. If you have questions, we do encourage you to type them in the chat box that is located in the control panel. You may submit as many questions as you'd like during the session, and we will get to them at the end portion of the session. We will record the session and post a copy of the recording on our video channel, youtube.com/CloudFlare. Now, let's get started. For those of you unfamiliar with CloudFlare, I have prepared a brief overview. CloudFlare is a cloud-based service that protects internet sites and the site runs faster through a single change in DNS. By providing top-notch security and performance optimization, we empower online sites to focus on their core competencies and grow. Our customers, such as Imager, Eurovision, NASDAQ, MIT, Meetup, among others, save resources, time, and money with CloudFlare. Now, with respect to security, CloudFlare protects your site from distributed denial of service or DDoS attacks and other web threats before they even hit your server. We have mitigated two of the largest attacks recorded in public history, a DDoS attack of 300 Gbps and a DDoS attack of 400 Gbps. With respect to performance, CloudFlare caches static content and speeds up your dynamic content. So we locate your content closer to your visitor as well as optimize it for their device, for their browser, and bandwidth needs. We currently serve more than 2 million sites and also billions of page views every single day. All of this is possible thanks to our global network, which rivals that of the largest internet companies. This is a snapshot of the network. We currently operate about 25 data centers globally and growing, and that helps our customer sites be safer, smarter, and faster. To learn more about CloudFlare, contact us at cloudflare.com or just dial in 888-99-FLARE. Now, Nick Sullivan is going to take it from here and talk about the hardware and how to protect your site. Nick, go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Ellie. So the Heartbleed bug is something that's been going around in the news. You probably have heard about it. It's been in every major news outlet in the world, basically. And it's a pretty serious bug that affects most of the internet. So what is the Heartbleed bug? Well, the Heartbleed bug is a software flaw, a mistake that was made in a piece of software called OpenSSL. Now, OpenSSL is the cryptographic library for many, many websites. For example, most of around 70% of websites use OpenSSL for its cryptographic portions. So when you access a site that starts with HTTPS, then you get a little lock in your address bar. That means that the site is encrypted and all the communication between you and the server is sent over a secure protected private channel. Now, in OpenSSL, there was a mistake that happened around 2 years ago that nobody caught. And what this mistake allowed people to do is any attacker to send a message to a server and obtain private information from that server. So what this can include is passwords or session IDs or, say, private keys, which is the most important part of how a website identifies itself to its customers. So if you go to a website right now, such as CloudFlare.com or Google.com, you should see in your corner, if you start with https://cloudflare.com, you should see a little lock icon, and if you click on that, it will show you the certificate of the site. And this site certificate is what proves that the site is authentic. Now, the bad part about the Heartbleed bug is if your site had the version of OpenSSL that had the flaw, then anyone could potentially go to your site and steal that certificate. So this is a very bad flaw, and it affected a lot of the internet. So the cryptographic portion of this library is okay, but this really gave us a really big information disclosure bug. And a lot of people have been scrambling to not only fix this bug on servers, but make sure that any information that is leaked is protected. So going more specifically to what information is at risk, there are usernames, passwords, private SSL keys, as I mentioned. So any site that you logged into and was vulnerable to the Heartbleed bug, someone could potentially have gotten your username and password out of that. This is a big deal. So private SSL keys are, as I mentioned, the keys to the kingdom. This is what allows someone to impersonate your site, and this is what most sites have had to do. So once they've fixed the vulnerability by updating OpenSSL, they also had to get new private SSL keys. So when this first came out, all of our customers were protected from Heartbleed because a little bit ahead of time we managed to patch before any public exploit code was out there. So if your site is on Cloudflare, it should be protected from Heartbleed. Okay, and but what we weren't sure of when Cloudflare first discovered this, and when the internet first discovered this, was whether this attack was strong enough that you could actually steal SSL keys. So what we created was something called the CloudFlare Heartbleed Challenge, and this was a challenge site. It was an independent site that we set up to be intentionally vulnerable to this bug, and we challenged the internet, everyone at large, to find the private keys of this site. And what we found was that, yes, some people were able to do so. So that confirmed one of the worst fears that we had about this bug. And on the line right now is Ben Murphy, who was one of these people, the contestants who found the private keys from the bug. We'll talk to them soon. So now, if you go to protecting your site, if your site is not on Cloudflare, you have to tell if your site is vulnerable or not to Heartbleed and update it. Most likely, your site, if it has an Apache or an Nginx server, will be using OpenSSL. And if that is the case, you should rebuild and reinstall your site. And make sure that you let your customers know that you've done so. Now, if your site was also vulnerable for a while, you should also take your SSL certificates and revoke them and create new ones from your certificate authority. And as an end user, if any site that you go to, you can go, there's a list at istheinternetfixedyet.com where they scan the top 10,000 sites on Alexa to see which ones are vulnerable to the Heartbleed still or not. And if any site that you've gone to is still vulnerable, I would avoid logging into that site. And if the site is fixed, then you should go ahead and change your password. And while you're changing your password, consider using a strong password. And if the site has two-factor authentication available, consider using two-factor authentication. That can protect you from if someone steals your password. So For website end users, it's basically that. Change your password for sites that are fixed, and for sites that aren't fixed, avoid going to them. For website owners, upgrade your software and revoke and renew your certificates. Website owners using CloudFlare, you're automatically protected, but you should also check your origin server to see if the private key on your origin server needs to be rotated as well. So now we have a Q&A with myself and Ben Murphy. So Ben is one of the top 4 winners who successfully solved the Heartbleed challenge. He did so within 1 day of the challenge being up. So we're going to ask him a few questions from the audience, and I'll start with a question myself. And we're going to find out from him how he solved the challenge, what techniques he used, and what are his thoughts about this bug and the impact on the internet. Ben, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hey, I'm Ben. I'm a software developer. Yeah, so I solved the challenge by taking an existing proof of concept that was written in Python, and I think quite popular, and just modified it slightly. So the existing one, it would only dump, I think, like 12K kilobytes from memory, and I just changed it a little bit so it dumped the full 64 kilobytes. And also changed it so when I got the request back from the server, it would search for the private key inside the request. So it's actually quite simple to search for the private key. So you just buy each kind of combination of bytes and see if it cleanly divides the public key. And yeah, and then I just set it up so I'd keep on making requests until it found the private key.
Right. So to make it more clear to the audience, what you can do with Heartbleed is send one request to the server, and it will dump or return to you up to 64 kilobytes of raw memory that the server is running. And what you did was you searched inside this memory for pieces of the private keys, specifically factors of the composite number that make up the RSA key. How does this proof of concept that you used find prime numbers out of 64 kilobytes of quote unquote random server data?
Yeah, so I mean, when you get this like 64 kilobytes back, you have basically about 64K different kind of like possible primes in it, and so you just take each one, and you get the public key, which is the composite, and you just do a division, divide the public key by each possible option. If one of them cleanly divides, it doesn't have a remainder, then you found the private key.
Right. Okay. So we have some questions from the audience. Thanks, Ben. And this is a question. First one. Yes. So we have a question here, and it says, "Is checking a remote server for the bug illegal under the U.S. COAS?" I don't have an answer to this. I'm sure. Do you have an answer to this question, Ben?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, so don't take my advice. But some of the checking tools, all they do is they respond back with data that you've actually sent yourself, so no one else's private data. So to me, that should be legal. But the tools that dump like other people's data, like raw other bits of memory, that's probably illegal. But I'm not a lawyer, so don't take my advice.
Right. No, I agree. I'm also not a lawyer. So don't take my advice on this, but I would recommend not using these proof of concept tools against the public internet. Nowadays, people are tracking to make sure that whether someone's using this attack or not, and it is really an attack. You're extracting data from the server in an unauthorized way. So that's not typically, unless you're authorized by the site owner like we were, then I would definitely recommend against it. Okay, here's another question. It says, is it possible to systematically walk memory, or does the attacker only get a more or less random chunk of 64K? I'll give this to you, Ben.
Yeah. So you basically read off like the memory like after where the server allocates your buffer. So it depends on where the server allocates your buffer. But the attacker is able to kind of influence this by sending different size requests. So it's not possible to like walk the whole heap systematically, but by varying the size of your request, you could probably eventually map the whole heap, like if you're lucky.
Yeah. So there's no way to say, give me all the memory starting at 0 and count up to the top, but you're at the whim of where the allocator places the incoming request. So you can get a lot of memory, potentially all of it, but not in a systematic way, I guess that covers basically that question. Okay, so here's another question. Are unpatched endpoint clients still vulnerable against man-in-the-middle attackers? So I think this question refers to servers. Ben, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I guess so. Like, so I mean, if your server leaks the private key to an attacker, then you're vulnerable to a man-in-the-middle attack. Like, I think that's what the question is.
Yeah, I think they are still vulnerable. So let's go on to the next question. This is a question that I think you can answer. Ben, it's, do you have suggested resources to analyze logs for abnormal traffic that may indicate attempts for Heartbleed attacks? If not, I think I can answer this question.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
The question is about if you run a server, is there a way to log anybody attempting to attack you with Heartbleed?
Okay, yeah. So I think there's some like IDS products that are meant to log these attacks. I'm not sure how effective they are. I think they're because I think they're kind of effective, but I don't really know.
Yeah. So for us, when we set up the Cloudflare challenge, we also added some logs into Nginx to make sure that we could validate that the people cracking the challenge were actually really cracking the challenge. We plan on open sourcing that change upstream today or tomorrow. So if you don't have Nginx, you can pick up this change and it'll get logs for you for people trying to attempt a Heartbleed attack. So here's another question. It says, browsers seem to have a wide variety of how they deal with certificate revocation. Is there a site that explains how to configure browsers to honor revocation lists for certificates, e.g. Safari on iPad? Now this is a real problem that has been raised its head since Heartbleed, which is a lot of sites are revoking their certificates, yet browsers still allow you to go to these sites whether or not they've revoked the certificate or not. For example, the Cloudflare challenge site, we revoked the certificate, and we found that many browsers, including the one listed here, Safari on iPad, were still able to go to the site, even though the certificate was revoked. Safari on Mac OS, as well as Internet Explorer and Firefox, also gave warnings about revocation, whereas Chrome did not up until 2 days later when they updated their internal browser revocation list. But I'm not aware of a good site that explains everything, how to configure all browsers to honor revocation lists. Ben, do you have any insight into this?
Yeah, so I think one big problem with certificate revocation is most browsers, so they'll try and contact the server to see if the certificate is revoked. But if they can't contact the server, then they'll just keep on viewing the page. And so in a way, like an attacker can always force you to accept or revoke the certificate because they can just sabotage your connection. So I think that's one reason why Chrome doesn't actually do the checks. Like it has a list internally, and so it doesn't have this failure mode, but it does have this other failure mode, which is Like you can't the certificate revocation is not updated straight away.
Right. Yeah, it is challenging for browsers to accurately prevent people from going to revoke sites. As been mentioned, if an attacker manages to block the online revocation check, then the browser needs to show you the site anyway, because it could be just a problem with the part that shows the revocation. So it's really tough to get revocation right. And the Internet, it turns out, was not built for mass revocation in a sane, immediate way. So that's a disappointing fact that everyone is beginning to discover. Okay, so here's another question. It says, so was the private key being able to be read in RAM just after the server restart as suspected, or is it possible also later on? Thanks. So, Ben, what was the timing for you for finding the private key in memory?
Yeah, so I think it was quite a while after you guys restarted the server. But it took, I think, an hour or two for me to find it. I think some other people have some exploits now that can dump it within a couple of seconds.
Right. So we initially thought that it could have had to do with the server reset, but more recent findings show that even if the server has been running for a very long time, it's possible for someone to obtain a private key. So reset is not the real problem here. Keys being in memory or pieces of keys being in memory are the problem. Okay, so here is another question that says, can a Heartbleed attack get past a redirect between subdomains from a vulnerable server to one that is not? And in what cases? I think that this is not possible. What the Heartbleed vulnerability does is reads memory from your web server. So if you have two web servers, one using a version of OpenSSL 101, which is safe, versus one that's actually has the bug, you can't read across processes. So the only memory you can get is from memory served from that web server. On the other hand, if you are serving multiple sites from the same web server, you may potentially be able to get information from any of the other sites served by the same web server. So this is kind of scary. So this is a question, I don't know if Ben, you've looked into this, but it says Android 4.1.1 version has been declared vulnerable to Heartbleed. How can a Heartbleed affect client Unix? Have you ever taken a look at this?
I haven't looked at it, but I assume like if it could read the memory of your browser, then an attacker could like steal like cookies or I guess cookies would probably be the main target, or encryption keys for other sites, so they could sniff your SSL traffic or stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, here's another question. It says, this one's for me. Is CloudFlare protecting customers by detecting the Heartbleed attacks in the firewall and blocking requests to the physical client boxes? When CloudFlare was vulnerable, was the memory from CloudFlare servers, or was it from the client? So just to be clear, CloudFlare was patched before this went public, but there was a period in time when this securing vulnerability was only known to the researchers who had found it and potentially anybody else who had independently found it. So we were vulnerable for a while before this bug was found and made public. And the question is, do we block the attack of the firewall and prevent access to the physical boxes? So the way that the CloudFlare architecture works is that when a visitor comes to a site that's protected on CloudFlare, it goes to a CloudFlare box which terminates your SSL connection. And then a new connection is made from a separate process back to the original box. That is the client origin server. So in this case, at no point if your site was on CloudFlare, was an attacker who was attacking your site able to get information from your home your origin server. It was only able to get information that was on a CloudFlare server. I mean, we have not seen any of these attacks or proof that any of these attacks actually happened. We patched well ahead of time. But if they were to happen, the only information they could get would be information from CloudFlare servers. And not to discount that, because any of your encrypted traffic would be potentially visible in memory. So passwords and session IDs and tokens and potentially private keys were available. But from information from your origin server, probably not. That's the question. Okay, so here's a question that says, could you write custom memory that causes remote execution on the server? Ben, you want to handle this?
No. Like it only does a read. Like so, it doesn't. It's not possible to get remote code execution from the bug.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is a vulnerability that is a memory disclosure or a disclosure vulnerability. It doesn't allow the attacker to do any modifications on the server. What could potentially happen is, depending on how the server is set up, this extensive read could maybe cause the server to crash, depending on how the memory is set up. But in terms of code execution, this is just a read bug. It's not, the attackers aren't able to write to it. Okay, so this is the end of the questions. I would like to thank Ben Murphy for coming on and talking with us about this, and I would like to thank everybody else for listening, and have a happy Heartbleed recovery. I know this has been tough for a lot of people, changing your passwords, and for people running sites to update this software. But you know, the worst is hopefully over, and we can go on the road to recovery from this very bad bug. I'll pass it back to you, Ellie.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, Ben, so much. That was the end of our session. For those of you that dialed in later, we will place a link on our YouTube channel on youtube.com/CloudFlare, where people would be able to listen to parts of the session or the whole webinar. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude the webinar for today. Have a great day, everyone.